Hello everybody, I'm Conquering History Games, and welcome to another progress report from Kalterkrieg. Today is Kalterkrieg, excuse me. This is progress report number 7, Danubian Federation. Before we get started, I just want to throw out there that my YouTube memberships are now officially open. If you want to join and get exclusive perks and such, the button should be down below, and every Sunday, starting this upcoming Sunday, we're going to be doing 4-hour minimum length streams exclusively for members. So I'll try to have a weekly schedule for that up no later than Wednesday. So just want to throw that out there. Anyway, let's jump into this progress report. We're going to start with the lore for a while here. Looking back, the time between 1937 and 1947 somehow seems much more than a decade. The Bethlen government in Hungary fell in the shadow of Black Monday. With it, the obstructionist elements against the idea of federalization, those that sought unsustainable privilege for some and penury for others simply over their nationality, were gone. Truly starting with the Auschwitz renegotiations, Kaiser Karl led nearly 3 years of rapid debate, compromise, and reform to selflessly modernize his empire. The Rotsösterreich government began the Balaton Congress of 1937-38 with all major regional governments invited to help redraw the empire. After nearly 6 weeks of continuous work, the ultimate compromise was made. 7 nations in a single state, or the Nationen innerhalb eines Staates Prinzip, became the order of the day, as the ambitious personal principle proposal of the Renner government failed to gain a quorum. The Common Army became the singular army of the Federation, aside from the National Landsturm that would stand to protect each nation's own Staatsreichs. These became known as the Balaton Principles. After the Congress was done, the new federal constitution was written and later ratified in each regional diet. Day by day, progress was made towards creating a society that could overlook, or at least work past, boundaries of nation and language. And in the end, on December 31st, 1939, as the multitudes of Austria-Hungary toasted the new year, they entered the new decade as citizen subjects of the Danubian Federation. But while the new federation was forged through the power of peace and diplomacy, war was brewing across Europe. The people of the federation would not stand for their blood to be pointlessly spilt on the Kaiserreich's behalf once again. But as the Third Internationale and Russian state began to threaten the nations of Danubia, the idealistic stance of pacifism and neutrality quickly fell by the wayside. January 4th, 1942. As the syndicalists barreled across the Rhine and Russian armies marched into Ukraine, Kaiser Karl sent an ultimatum to both belligerent powers. He'd hoped that the war could be resolved peacefully, but this was an ultimatum backed by the new Federal Gemeinsame Armee. Paris's response was apoplectic. Moscow's one of pure ignorance. After 1 month, Karl formally offered his armies to the beleaguered Kaiser Wilhelm III in an ironic twist on the events of 1914, and Danubia joined the Second Weltkrieg. The Danubian War could be considered in 3 separate fronts. The west, where the volunteer Danube Legionnaires, gotta pronounce these Danubian legions with French accents, were joined by a proper expeditionary force, allowing Germany to stabilize a quickly collapsing front line in the Rhineland and slowly turn the tide of the syndicalist onslaught. The east, where Danubian troops broke the siege of Odessa and advanced into the Ukraine, liberating much of the rump state that exists now and playing a huge part in forcing Savinkov to seek a humiliating ceasefire on the Dnieper-Daugava line. Finally, Italy, where Danubia skirmished fiercely and led a number of grand offensives in the Po Valley in support of the Italian Republic against the Socialist Republic of Italy. Their successes here were sadly tarnished by the tremendously botched combined arms landing at Rimini, which extended the war in Italy by several long and bloody months. After 5 bloody years, laurels were to be heaped at Danubia's feet. The nation had intervened, blunted, and reversed the Internationale and Russian advances, as well as collapsed the Socialist Republic of Italy completely, saving the Kaiser from almost certain doom. While blood and treasure had been spent, not a single enemy soldier had entered the Danubian domain. A nation under arms, a common cause united. As the war ended, Danubia found itself in an enviable position. Whereas the other nations of Europe had been brutalized by bombing raids and nuclear weapons, Danubia has only been strengthened by it. The triangle of the Sudetenland, Bohemia, Moravia, and Silesia, as well as western Galicia, host industrial combines like Skoda that are the envy of their war-ravaged German competitors. The great shipyards of Illyria stand ready to switch from military to commercial production. The military itself is relatively modern, though the inventory remains diverse, and the future holds opportunities to dictate how Danubia will fight the next war. Even on the political stage, the veteran Wilhelm Miklas and his grand coalition have worked tremendously in upholding and disseminating our federal values, though upcoming national elections this year could serve as an unwelcome roadblock to the federal government if certain trends continue, especially in Illyria. Not all is well, however. The Kaiser's health is famously fragile, with occasional scares and close runs both before and since his nasty bronchitis hospitalization in 1940. The Russians remain a restive threat to the east, and the uneasy subject of Germany's continued authoritarian domineering bent, combined with their unholy atomic bombs, has made many politicians rather uneasy over the prospects of the new post-war world. The starting situation, January 1st, 1948. Pretty much the first thing the player can do is deal with the Austrian regional election. A timely intervention there can propel Joseph Rechter to power and break the SPAPD/O government in Austria. The regional government's support of the national government is important. Regional elections will be a persistent feature through the next few years. Each national crown land has its own election before the federal level elections in 1951. The elections are in the order. Number 1. Austria, 1948. Number 2, Bohemia, 1948. Number 3, Illyria, 1948. Number 4, Galicia, 1949. Number 5, Slovakia, 1949. Number 6, Transylvania, 1950. Number 7, Hungary, 1950. Then the federal election kicks off in 51. Each regional election will have its own quirks and momentum, but as a leader of the CSP-CANI-EP at the federal level, your broad goal is to get your allied national parties into office, if they're not there already. Here is the makeup of the Danubian Chamber of Deputies at Game Start. But wait, there's more! The first 4 focuses you want to pick are those that deal with the formation of the peace budget. These are going to shape the medium-term future in the shape of a dynamic national spirit that will replace the unfettered economy you start with. Depending on your choices with the focuses, you will have different results. Once the peace budget has passed, head of government Wilhelm Miklas will, after a couple of weeks pass, announce that he is ready to retire to his favorite salon, drink coffee, spend more time with his 14 children, read the papers, and let someone else run the country. So the KSP-KNEP is thrown into an emergency election, which one of the 4 candidates will win. Who are the 4 candidates? Well, there's number 1, Engelbert Dollfuss, darling of the hardline faction, who think the Federation went too far with the Balaton principles and rumored to have support from Berlin. His election, some fear, would lead to backsliding on the commitments of the federal government, perhaps even damage to the Grand Coalition. However, there is hope that his influential protege, Leopold Figl, current foreign minister, will be able to keep the diminutive Austrians' leadership moderate. Number 2, Julius Raab, Miklas's political protege and the current finance minister. His credentials are strong and he's well regarded. He doesn't particularly offend anyone, which is a strength and a weakness all in one. Number 3, Alcide de Gasperi, the leader of the Federal Diet, an Italian from Tessen in Tyrol. His candidacy is strong, and he is seen as a reliable federalist as well as a competent leader, with a key interest in addressing the current limitations of the Balaton system in regards to the rights of national minorities. His election would take the wind out of the sails of the minority bloc, but raise the fears of the hardliners. Finally, number 4, Zoltan Tildy, the leader of the quote-unquote minority bloc within the Christian bloc. He would argue the Balaton principles didn't go far enough and that the federal government needs to be more representative of its peoples. Tildy is also interesting as being the only candidate for minister-president who is openly critical of the current German government. Once the emergency election is completed, each minister-president has their own branch of the focus tree to follow, which reflects their own personal agendas now that they're in charge of the country. Foreign policy. Much like in the Second Weltkrieg, there are three fronts to Danubian foreign policy. You have options to keep the Russians busy, to interfere in Italy to keep the Republic alive, and the Entente off your border, and then there is the question of continuing to hew to the line set in Berlin or going off alone. There is also the Mitteleuropäisches Wiederaufbau project, or, if you prefer, the Fiegelplan. Named after the Danubian foreign minister, this ambitious plan allows Danubia to support members of the Reichspakt by dedicating their own civilian factories for a period of time in order to build civs in allied states. This represents the kind of economic assistance that Danubia is well positioned to make. With the right minister-president, they can expand that assistance to other powers whom they would consider friendly. Joining the war late, under the threat of belligerence, as well as being involved in attempting to keep Europe peaceful, plus acts such as the Fiegelplan, means that Danubia is well regarded as a diplomatic power around the world despite their closeness to Germany. It is up to the player if they wish to maintain that reputation. Domestic policy. There are various events related to foci that allow the player to develop certain regions. Making choices here will unlock decision trees and also potentially sway the aforementioned regional elections in your favor. The von Mises Committee will be providing insight and guidance to various investment projects. Choose wisely, though. There are only so many kronen in the federal budget, and you can't have everything. Aside from that, there are also events about life in Danubia. Political movements, nationalist outbursts, cultural events, and other occurrences that happen within national borders. What exactly those are, well, I wouldn't want to spoil it for you. After some time, Kaiser Karl will step down. Planned for years, the abdication and subsequent transition of power to his son and heir, Otto, is a smooth and painless one. Otto von Habsburg, the new monarch of the Federation, is known to be a polite, respectful, and extremely knowledgeable man, though his lack of a wife is mildly controversial in certain circles. That said, the new Kaiser is said to be courting the young Princess Regina of Saxe-Meiningen, so surely an engagement is just around the corner. The Armed Forces. Military events will initially focus on demobilization from conscription, learning lessons from the last war, and deciding how to win the next one, as well as the never-ending task of making sure that the Danubian army, with its multinational multitudes, can function as an effective fighting force despite having several languages under its belt. A wary eye remains eastward against the revisionists. Danubia does start with jet fighters and the jet technology unlocked, which means that you are, with the Aviacorps license building German Me-262s, at least at the start of the game. There is also the decision if the air arm should remain subordinate to naval and army commanders, or if it deserves to be its own independent organization. Likewise, the fleet is going to undergo an overhaul. What it looks like afterward will be up to the player, but the age of the battleship is demonstrably close to its end. Danubia has a strong enough economy that it could easily support an arms industry and even make exports to key partners. If the right decisions are made, it could also become the gun soul of Europe, selling to whoever has the cash or whoever furthers their goals in the proxy wars that are going to break out across the world like a rash. The military trees get more ambitious towards the end, but they are expected to serve you from 1948 until 1960 at least. Nuclear weapons. Of course, Danubia will have an eye on its own nuclear weapons program. It has become patently obvious that these are the new colonies, and if you want to be taken seriously, you need a couple of them at the minimum. Much like colonies, however, they're expensive, don't do much, and make a number of people upset with you. So there is a question about whether they crib from the Germans' notes or go into a full cooperative alliance around the subject. Danubia does have some cards if they decide to develop an independent deterrent, or if they go into concord with the Germans. They have both the Baitia mine in Transylvania and Rozna mine in Bohemia, which has been in operation as a uranium mine for over 50 years by the start of the game, which means raw materials, at least, won't be an issue. The minorities question. Danubia will remain stable for a while at least, well, stable as it ever is. We don't plan on Danubian collapsed material until release 0.2 at the earliest. There are still a lot of mechanics and details that need implementing despite the progress already made. But as you can see, there's also a lot that you can do while you try to spin the top hard enough that it topples over. Probably supposed to say doesn't topple over. By the end, you might decide you'd rather keep the band together and see what happens next. Conclusion. Danubia is a nation of multitudes. That will be reflected throughout gameplay. There will rarely be a single obviously good conclusion for the questions you must face. Rather, you have to manage the river of politics as carefully and skillfully as you would the Danube. Trouble can come from abroad or within, and swift movements in any direction threaten the fragile equilibrium of this decade-old reformulation of a very old country indeed. And that's it. That's the progress report. So thank you very much. I'm Conquering History Games. And again, membership, if you want to support the channel, button should be below. I'll see you guys in progress report number 8, which is, let me check my notes here. Progress report number 8 is going to be the economy. It's going to be like technology. We're going to be focusing on a mechanic. So yeah, looking forward to that. See you then. Bye.